YT likens their Izzo trail bike to the katana, the Japanese sword that was claimed to be one of the finest military cutting weapons in world history. What does that feel like out on the trails? Stay tuned to find out in this long-term review. Beside me is YT's trail assassin, the Izzo. This is YT's shortest travel full suspension bike to date, with 130mm of travel on both ends, 29-inch wheels, and it's designed to be a trail bike through and through, opposed to a short travel enduro bike like we're starting to see many brands coming out with. YT's using their kind of standard horse link suspension setup, but in a slightly different package to deliver the 130mm travel in the rear, and they've given it quite kind of purposeful kinematics all around to deliver the performance that they wanted, with high progression at 33% overall, which should allow you to use a coil shock if you wanted to, or certainly most air shocks on the market with no problems with bottoming out. It's fairly high anti-squat, but it's not ridiculous, going from about 100% in the easiest climbing gears through to about 125% in the hardest gears at sag, to give all the pedaling support that you want without being too firm off the top to climb up kind of technical slippery terrain. And there's quite low anti-rise at about 50%, which should keep the rear end free under braking loads. YT gave the Izzo a geometry adjusting flip chip in the upper shock mount, which gives you a choice between a high and a low position, with a 5mm bottom bracket height and half a degree head angle and seat tube angle differences between the two settings. So in that high mode, you've got the highest BB, the steepest head tube and the steepest seat tube angle, which should give you slightly improved climbing characteristics at the expense of some stability for the descents. In the low mode, which is what I've been running it for the majority of the time, the bottom bracket is quite low, sitting at 40mm below the axles. The head angle is kind of in the middle of the sort of range at 66 degrees, which kind of shows its intentions at being a machine that's equally designed to go up the hill as well as down. And the seat tube angle is fairly steep at 77 degrees for this category of bike. They kind of went down the size-specific chainstay route, but there's only two different lengths of chainstay offered. So in their small to extra large size range, the small, medium and large get 432mm chainstays, whereas the extra large I tested and the XXL get 437mm chainstays, which should just help kind of improve the weight distribution a little bit for those larger sizes and kind of stop you feeling like you're so far off the back when you're climbing it, or just generally on the trail, giving a little bit more front wheel sort of weighting. Other figures are the reach numbers, which are not extreme, but certainly kind of with the times, I guess. The large comes in at 472mm and the extra large I tested at 492, and the stack height is fairly on the low side, but not crazy, kind of cross-country slammed, sitting around 625mm for the large and 635 for the extra large I tested. All this tots up to my extra large tested coming in at a 1240mm wheelbase, which is fairly long for this category of bike, but as we'll get onto in a little bit, the agility hasn't been totally lost from it. In terms of spec choices on the YT Izzo, YT continues to use their core and uncaged kind of range names. The core models, as you may be able to tell by the name, are their sort of more standard builds. They share a lot of similarities across the model range of YT, most of them using Fox suspension and kind of SRAM drivetrains and brakes, whereas the uncaged bikes are typically slightly more exotic builds, using slightly different, kind of less common parts, and often with a little bit more of a kind of purposeful focus that takes the character of the bike slightly different to the core range. In the case of the Izzo, the uncaged model that they offer is the Uncaged 7, and it comes in a much more kind of XC race sort of focus. It uses lighter weight suspension, RockShox SID up front, and the travel also gets bumped down to 120mm as opposed to the 130mm on the core range. The core spec levels range from the $3,300 Core 2 through the Core 3, and then to the $5,000 Core 4 that I tested here, which is their kind of top of the line core level spec, and features a pretty nice kind of combination of exotic parts, but keeping it sensible and not going on to the kind of hyper level parts I guess, that you could do to really push that price tag if you wanted to. Up front, you've got a Fox 34 float fork with the grip 2 damper, nice and adjustable, and in the back is a Fox float DPS shock. In terms of the wheels, you've got DT Swiss's XMC 1501s with carbon fiber rims and Maxxis Forecaster tyres around them in the exo casing and dual compound. Now these tyres we'll get onto a little bit. They've kind of impressed me a lot, and they're very suitable for this kind of style of bike. The cockpit is race face with their turbine alloy stem as standard, and next are carbon fiber bars. We've got SRAM on the braking and the drivetrain duties with a G2 RSC brake set with a 200mm front rotor and 180mm rear rotor, and then SRAM's Exo-1 Eagle mechanical group set using their Exo-1 Eagle carbon crank as well to knock off a little bit of weight there. And otherwise you've got YT Postman dropper, which uses the SDG Telus internals, super proven, really smooth, nice kind of low lever force required to drop the post. And that rounds out what is, I think, a really nicely kind of selected spec for this Izzo, given the bike enough sort of solid strength and stiffness that lets you push it to the kind of limits that it sort of suggests that you do, but keeping things super light and agile, that we'll kind of talk about a little bit in the ride impressions next. So that's the tech talk done. Now let's talk about how the YT Izzo rides. When YT used the katana as the sort of emblem for the Izzo, it really kind of set the precedent that this is going to be a razor sharp, agile, really just precise kind of bike. And normally the marketing a bike company uses can kind of be a little bit misleading or a little bit far-fetched. In the case of the Izzo, it's not all that far wrong. This thing is really just a absolute kind of speed-focused, razor-sharp machine that has been an absolute pleasure to ride. And although it's typically a little bit less travel, a little bit less aggressively intended than the kind of bikes that I would normally ride, it's really given me the kind of platform to go crunch out some longer miles on some more kind of epic pedally missions, and to enjoy the slightly mellower trails that we have around here in the Tweed Valley in Scotland, the kind of classic Seven Stains trail centre stuff that is super fun but easy to overbike yourself on. The Izzo has been perfect for that, but also I have ended up kind of inevitably taking it down some stuff that is probably a little bit outside what YT would have intended it to be designed for, and I'm still here, I'm still alive, and the Izzo is still very much in one piece. So let's talk about how it's achieved that, and exactly who may be the best kind of customer for the Izzo. If you look at the YT website, you'll see they sort of suggest that the Izzo is designed for roughly 70% uphill, 30% down, and so the climbing performance, the pedaling performance is clearly at the very highest priority for YT with the Izzo. And surprisingly enough, it pedals pretty damn well. The geometry all round, it's got a slightly lower bar than I would normally ride, with the limited rise on the race face carbon bar, and the stack height not being quite as high as most of the kind of large, extra large enduro bikes that I would typically ride. And because of that, the kind of front end does give you notions of the sort of hunkered down XC sort of, more over the front riding position. It's certainly not extreme like an XC bike, thankfully, but yeah, it does kind of just give you the sort of inclination to just kind of get the head down and pedal and put yourself in the hurt locker a little bit more often. In terms of the suspension feel, the platform is not super stiff, but you've only got 130mm of travel to move through, and there's still enough support in there that I didn't even once think about needing to use that lockout switch. I've been running it on the higher end of the sag levels that YT would recommend at 25%. I did try it a couple of times with 30%, which still felt really good in the descents, but you did then end up with the pedals in quite a low position. I think the using the high position in the flip chip in combination with slightly more sag did work out pretty good, but I settled for slightly less sag at 25%, and the low mode in the flip chip to give kind of the best overall balance of handling features. And yeah, that kind of rear end not being super firm when it's not locked out, but still kind of plenty firm enough and plenty efficient enough, means that you don't lose all of your traction as well. So even on the kind of technical climbs, slippery routes and rocks on the way up, this thing does kind of do a pretty good job at using those very low profile tires to claw their way up the hill and keep things comfortable as well. So all around, pedaling the Izzo has been a very pleasant affair. Getting onto the descending, and that's when really the Izzo came alive even more so. Of course, with a fast rolling tire and fairly low weight overall, it was always going to pedal well, but the actual descending performance is where I found the most excitement from this thing, and was quite surprised just how capable it is, given it is a kind of trail, almost cross-country focused machine. The sort of stability that it manages to produce when you really get up to high speeds is really outstanding. It almost feels like it hunkers down the faster that you go. I guess the low BB, and maybe you start to back your weight off the back a little bit so you're sat into the travel, makes for a really nice stable machine that yeah, even when you're going flat out, doesn't feel super nervous. That said, it's still very agile. In terms of the spec that YT has chosen on it, I think going for the forecaster tires, but still giving you, the G2 brakes are not ultra powerful, but when combined with a 200mm front rotor, 180 in the back, they're plenty of power enough that the tires will be your kind of limiting factor on the traction before you exceed the power of the brakes, I'd say. But overall, the spec has been absolutely trouble-free, and I mean, I did at one point swap out the tires for something a little bit burlier, but even in these kind of wet Scottish conditions where traction is always lacking, I ended up preferring the feel of the bike with the forecasters because they're a little bit more realistic about what you can expect to kind of achieve from the chassis and from the suspension package. By fitting a more kind of capable enduro set of tires, what I just found is that I'd be pushing the bike harder and closer to its limit earlier before it kind of became fun, if that makes sense. It almost, yeah, you just ended up pushing the bike beyond its limits without getting that kind of fun sort of breaking loose and yeah, just kind of gradually showing you the limits instead of just hitting them firmly when you hit the bottom of the travel or something, because you've gone into the section of trail as if you're on an enduro bike, which this thing is not. The only other gripe, well, the only real gripe at all that I had with this, the spec package on this bike was the Fox 34 fork. So initially, yeah, getting the setup on the 34 was quite difficult for me. I'm 96 kilos, and I don't think that I should be at the absolute top of the weight scale. I know this is a kind of slightly more cross-country focused bike, and the typical people that you see riding these kind of bikes, and especially going quick on them, do not look like me. They're certainly a little bit more svelte. But the fact that they offer an XL and an XXL, I think a lot of people are going to be pushing my weight, if not higher. And the 34 fork, I hit, well, the kind of recommendations for pressures, I don't think are correct at all, especially up at this kind of weight range. I set the fork up to my weight, and immediately I had to change it because it was sitting far too low in its travel. I then increased the pressure up to the maximum allowed pressure that Fox lets you put into the 34, 120 psi, and it was still running slightly too low for me. And Fox recommends this pressure for riders up to 113 kilos or something. So something doesn't seem quite right to me there. And I've kind of spoken to a couple of other people who have had similar issues. So I'm not exactly sure what's going on there. What I did end up doing is exceeding the recommended pressure. This is not something that I would condone one of you guys doing. If you do so, it's absolutely at your own risk, but certainly you'll lose your warranty, and yeah, nobody's going to be kind of held responsible for you choosing to do so. But once I did exceed that pressure, I got it to a feeling that was right for me. I took that risk, and it paid off. But yeah, if you're thinking about doing that, then yeah, Don't let it didn't come from me. Okay, right. Yeah. Overall, the Izzo has been a fantastic bike, and certainly for a kind of purposeful, focused trail center weapon, or something for long days in the backcountry where you're not going to be hitting the kind of roughest, gnarliest descents, I think this is an absolutely incredible machine, and one that a lot of people are going to have a lot of fun on. What do you guys think? Let us know in the comments, and let us know, is this bike on your radar? Have you ridden one? Do you have any thoughts on it? Or yeah, is there any questions that you want to know about this thing that we can answer? Let us know in the comments, and we'll be sure to let you know. I hope you guys have enjoyed this video. Give us a like if you have, and be sure to subscribe to the channel to help us grow and to see more videos on awesome bikes like this. Thank you very much for tuning in, guys. Hope to catch you out on the trails.